The morning of June 19th, 1944 broke clear over the Philippine Sea. At 0700 hours, aboard the Japanese carrier Taiho, Lieutenant Warrant Officer Saburo Komatsu completed his pre-flight inspection of his Mitsubishi A6M0 fighter. The aircraft gleamed in the tropical sun, its polished aluminum skin reflecting the confidence that still lingered among Japanese naval aviators despite 2 years of mounting losses. Komatsu adjusted his leather flight helmet and glanced toward the horizon where American Task Force 58 steamed somewhere beyond the curvature of the Earth. Intelligence reports indicated 15 American carriers operating in 3 groups west of the Mariana Islands. The upcoming strike would involve over 400 Japanese aircraft launched in coordinated waves to overwhelm American defenses and deliver a decisive blow against the invasion fleet threatening Saipan. What Komatsu and his fellow pilots could not know was that within hours, their fundamental understanding of aerial combat would shatter against a technological reality they were unprepared to comprehend. The Zero fighter represented the pinnacle of Japanese naval aviation when it entered service in 1940. Its exceptional range exceeded 1,800 miles with drop tanks, allowing strikes deep into enemy territory while maintaining fuel reserves for combat and return. The aircraft could outturn any Allied fighter through its combination of light weight and large wing area. In the hands of experienced pilots, the Zero had dominated every opponent from China to the Dutch East Indies, from Pearl Harbor to the Coral Sea. Commander Minoru Genda had developed tactics maximizing the Zero's advantages: engage at medium altitude where maneuverability peaked, force turning engagements where lighter weight guaranteed superiority, and exploit the aircraft's exceptional visibility to maintain situational awareness. These methods had worked brilliantly against Brewster Buffaloes, Curtiss P-40 Warhawks, and the early Grumman F4F Wildcats. Japanese pilots believed their training and aircraft combination remained superior, despite troubling reports from the Solomons and Central Pacific. If you're enjoying this deep dive into the story, hit the subscribe button and let us know in the comments from where in the world you are watching from today. But the arithmetic of attrition had been working against Japanese naval aviation since Midway. The careful selection and extensive training that produced pre-war pilots required 3 years under peacetime conditions. Each experienced aviator lost represented irreplaceable institutional knowledge, accumulated through thousands of flight hours and dozens of combat missions. By mid-1944, most Japanese carriers embarked air groups where veterans comprised less than 20% of pilot strength. Ensign Hiroshi Tanaka, flying as Komatsu's wingman that morning, exemplified the new generation of Japanese naval aviators. He had graduated from flight training just 10 weeks earlier, with 75 total hours in his logbook. Fuel shortages eliminated advanced aerobatics and extended cross-country navigation training. Ammunition scarcity reduced gunnery practice to shooting at static ground targets. Tanaka had never fired his guns at a moving aerial target, never experienced the disorientation of actual combat maneuvering, never understood how quickly situational awareness collapsed when tracers started flying. The contrast between Tanaka's preparation and that of his pre-war predecessors revealed the depth of Japan's training crisis. Before Pearl Harbor, naval aviation cadets spent months mastering basic flight, then progressed through intermediate training, emphasizing formation, flying, and navigation, before advancing to operational training in frontline aircraft. The final phase included extensive gunnery practice, combat tactics against dissimilar aircraft, and carrier qualification requiring dozens of successful arrested landings. Only then did pilots join operational squadrons where veteran instructors mentored them through their first combat experiences. By 1944, this systematic approach had collapsed under the weight of mounting losses and fuel shortages. Training duration shrank from 3 years to 6 months. Flight hours decreased from 600 to less than 100. Most critically, the experienced instructors who had guided pre-war training were dead, killed in the grinding attrition battles over Guadalcanal, Rabaul, and the Central Pacific. Their replacements lacked both combat experience and teaching skills, creating a downward spiral where inadequately trained pilots led even more poorly prepared students. Across 300 miles of ocean, aboard the American carrier USS Lexington, Lieutenant Alexander Vrasiu completed his own pre-flight preparations. His Grumman F6F Hellcat sat among dozens of similar aircraft spotted on the flight deck, each painted in glossy sea blue with white identification markings. Vrasiu had accumulated over 400 hours in the Hellcat since transitioning from Wildcats the previous year. He had shot down 19 Japanese aircraft in various engagements and understood his mount's capabilities with the intimacy that comes from extensive combat experience. The F6F Hellcat entered service in January 1943 as a direct response to combat reports analyzing the Zero's strengths and weaknesses. Grumman engineers had access to captured Zero specimens, pilot debriefings, and tactical analyses from 2 years of Pacific combat. They designed an aircraft specifically to counter Japanese fighters using overwhelming firepower, robust protection, and superior high-speed performance, rather than attempting to match the Zero's maneuverability. The Hellcat's Pratt & Whitney R-2800 Wasp engine produced 2,000 horsepower, nearly double the Zero's Nakajima Sakai 14-engine output. This power advantage translated into superior performance across multiple parameters. Maximum speed reached 380 miles per hour compared to the Zero's 331. More critically, the Hellcat could climb at 3,500 feet per minute, vastly exceeding the Zero's 2,600 feet per minute climb rate. This climb rate differential might seem minor, barely 1,000 feet per minute difference. But in aerial combat, such margins determined who controlled altitude, and altitude determined who controlled the engagement. A Hellcat pilot could climb above attacking Zeros, maintain energy advantage throughout the fight, and dictate combat terms by choosing when and how to engage. The Japanese pilot, unable to climb quickly enough to threaten the American above him, faced the terrible choice between fleeing or accepting combat at severe disadvantage. The Hellcat's armament overwhelmed anything Japanese aircraft designers had produced. 6 Browning M250 caliber machine guns, each firing 850 rounds per minute, delivered a combined rate of fire exceeding 100 rounds per second. Each gun carried 400 rounds of ammunition, providing nearly 30 seconds of sustained fire. The ammunition itself was deadly, armor-piercing incendiary rounds that could penetrate engine blocks, ignite fuel tanks, and shred control surfaces. Japanese pilots reported that being hit by concentrated 50 caliber fire felt like flying into an invisible wall. Aircraft didn't just take damage, they disintegrated. Wings separated from fuselages, engines exploded, fuel tanks erupted in fireballs. The psychological impact of such devastating firepower compounded the physical destruction, creating fear that eroded combat effectiveness even before the first shot. Protection systems gave Hellcat pilots confidence their Zero opponents could never enjoy. Over 200 pounds of armor plate surrounded the cockpit, including seatback protection, head armor, and floor plates capable of stopping 20mm cannon rounds. The bulletproof windscreen consisted of layered glass, 1.5 inches thick. Self-sealing fuel tanks incorporated multiple rubber layers that expanded when punctured, preventing the catastrophic fires that destroyed so many Zeros. The robust airframe could absorb tremendous punishment while maintaining structural integrity. Test pilots had deliberately subjected Hellcats to damage that would destroy lighter fighters, then successfully returned to base. This durability meant American pilots could make mistakes, take hits, and survive to learn from experience. Japanese pilots in Zeros had no such margin for error. A single burst of 50 caliber fire often proved instantly fatal. At 0800 hours, Vice Admiral Mark Mitcher aboard Lexington received radar warning of incoming Japanese aircraft bearing 270 degrees at 150 miles distance. The SK Air Search radar had detected the first wave of Japanese strike aircraft, while they were still 20 minutes flying time from the American task force. This technological advantage transformed defensive operations from reactive scrambling to coordinated interception with overwhelming force positioned for maximum advantage. Fighter direction officers in the Combat Information Center began vectoring defending Hellcats toward specific intercept coordinates. Clear radio communications linked controllers with airborne fighters, providing real-time tactical guidance throughout the engagement. The integrated system represented revolutionary command and control capability that maximized defensive efficiency by concentrating fighters at optimal intercept points with altitude and positional advantages. Japanese carriers lacked equivalent radar systems. The Type 21 air search radar installed on some vessels provided only 60-mile detection range with poor reliability and frequent false contacts. Without height-finding capability or integrated fighter direction, Japanese combat air patrols operated independently, using pre-war tactical doctrine that emphasized individual initiative over centralized control. The absence of coordinated defense prevented efficient fighter allocation against multiple incoming raids while limiting tactical flexibility during engagements. Commander David McCampbell led VF-15's 1st Division from USS Essex, climbing toward the incoming raid at military power. His 12 Hellcats maintained tight formation while following radar vectors toward assigned targets. Each pilot averaged over 300 hours flight time, with extensive gunnery and tactical training completed at shore facilities in the United States. The American training program had expanded dramatically throughout 1943, producing 10,000 new naval aviators annually. Operational training units provided 500 hours total flight time, including 150 hours in combat aircraft types. Advanced fighter training emphasized deflection shooting, energy management, and coordinated team tactics against dissimilar aircraft, simulating enemy capabilities. Pilots practiced shooting at towed sleeve targets until they could consistently place rounds within killing distance. They learned section tactics where pairs of aircraft supported each other through mutual covering maneuvers. They studied captured enemy aircraft to understand vulnerabilities and exploit them systematically. The Japanese formation encountered the first Hellcats at 09:15 hours, approximately 90 miles west of Guam. American fighters attacked from above using altitude advantage for high-speed diving passes. Ensign Tanaka broke left, attempting to force an overshoot, executing the standard defensive maneuver he had practiced during abbreviated training. But the Hellcat followed his turn with surprising agility. The powerful engine maintaining speed through the maneuver where the Zero's controls grew heavy and unresponsive. Multiple .50 caliber rounds struck Tanaka's aircraft, severing control cables and puncturing fuel tanks that immediately ignited. The Zero's lack of armor protection proved catastrophic, as armor-piercing incendiary rounds penetrated the thin aluminum structure without resistance. Tanaka's aircraft exploded when flames reached the wing fuel tanks, the pilot consumed in the fireball before he could react. The entire engagement from initial turn to explosion lasted perhaps 4 seconds. Lieutenant Komatsu witnessed his wingman's destruction with disbelief that bordered on incomprehension. The Zero's reputation for invincibility had been built on 2 years of victories against inferior Allied opposition. Yet he had just watched a fellow pilot destroyed with apparent ease by an American fighter, demonstrating performance characteristics that contradicted every intelligence estimate. The psychological impact spread through the formation as other pilots witnessed their comrades destroyed without opportunity for effective resistance. Commander McCampbell's division executed coordinated slashing attacks using superior speed and firepower. The Hellcats dove from 28,000 feet, reaching 450 miles per hour in their attack runs before zooming back to altitude. This energy-based tactical approach negated the Zero's maneuverability advantage while exploiting its inferior high-speed handling characteristics. Japanese pilots attempting traditional turning engagements found themselves unable to force Americans into sustained dogfights. Each Hellcat pilot maintained strict energy discipline, refusing to engage in low-speed turning battles where Zeros excelled. The Americans demonstrated remarkable teamwork, with wingmen protecting leaders during attack runs while maintaining mutual support throughout the engagement. This coordination reflected extensive multi-aircraft tactical training, emphasizing section and division tactics over individual combat. The Hellcats' robust radio equipment enabled clear communications despite electromagnetic interference from dozens of simultaneous transmissions. Japanese pilots struggled with inferior radio systems producing static and feedback, preventing effective tactical coordination. Many Zero pilots disabled their radios entirely due to constant interference, relying on hand signals and pre-briefed formations. This communication breakdown compounded tactical disadvantages as Japanese formations fragmented under coordinated American attacks. Without radio coordination, individual pilots found themselves isolated and vulnerable to concentrated American firepower from multiple directions. The first engagement ended with severe Japanese losses, as 12 Zeros fell to Hellcat guns within 8 minutes. American pilots observed characteristics, contradicting intelligence estimates of enemy capabilities. The Japanese fighters demonstrated poor gunnery, with most bursts passing harmlessly behind intended targets. Their evasive maneuvers followed predictable patterns, suggesting inadequate combat training and limited tactical repertoire. Several Japanese pilots abandoned advantageous positions through apparent confusion or inexperience, failing to exploit brief opportunities when Hellcats presented vulnerable aspects. Lieutenant Alexander Vraciu from VF-16 aboard Lexington intercepted a second Japanese formation, attempting to penetrate the fighter screen. His section of 4 Hellcats engaged 12 enemy aircraft with devastating effectiveness, shooting down 6 planes in 8 minutes. Vraciu expended only 360 rounds of his 2,400-round ammunition load, demonstrating the effectiveness of American gunnery training combined with the Hellcats' concentrated firepower. The 50 caliber guns proved overwhelming against the Zero's fragile structure. Short bursts produced immediate catastrophic damage with wings separating, engines exploding, and fuel tanks igniting from incendiary rounds. The technological disparity became increasingly apparent as the battle developed throughout the morning. Hellcats absorbed multiple hits from Japanese 7.7mm machine guns without significant damage, while their own weapons destroyed Zeros with minimal ammunition expenditure. American pilots reported enemy aircraft disintegrating under concentrated fire, often exploding after just 2 or 3 seconds of accurate shooting. The Zero's 20mm cannons posed theoretical threat, but low muzzle velocity and limited ammunition reduced practical effectiveness. Most Japanese pilots exhausted their cannon ammunition quickly through poor fire discipline, leaving only rifle-caliber machine guns for subsequent engagements. The 30 or 60 round per gun cannon loadout disappeared in seconds during panic firing, leaving pilots effectively defenseless against armored American fighters. Radar-directed fighter control enabled efficient vector management as American fighters intercepted multiple incoming waves. Fighter direction officers maintained complete tactical awareness through radar tracking and pilot reports, positioning fresh fighters at optimal intercept points. This systematic defense prevented Japanese formations from coordinating mass attacks against the carrier force. Individual Japanese groups arrived piecemeal, encountering concentrated Hellcat formations positioned for maximum tactical advantage. Vice Admiral Jisaburo Ozawa launched his second wave at 0856 hours, comprising 128 aircraft from all available carriers. The strike included 48 Zero fighters, 53 Yokosuka D-4Y Judy dive bombers, and 27 Nakajima B-6N Jill torpedo bombers, tasked with overwhelming American defenses through sheer numbers. However, inexperienced pilots struggled with basic navigation as formations fragmented during the long approach flight. Several groups became lost entirely, wandering aimlessly while consuming precious fuel reserves before finding their targets. The navigation failures revealed how drastically Japanese pilot quality had declined. Pre-war training emphasized dead-reckoning navigation over ocean expanses, where no landmarks existed for reference. Pilots learned to maintain precise headings while compensating for wind drift, track fuel consumption to calculate range, and navigate by sun, angle, and ocean swell patterns. These skills required extensive practice under various weather conditions, with experienced instructors providing feedback. By 1944, abbreviated training programs eliminated most navigation instruction beyond basic principles. Student pilots received minimal over-water flying experience, sometimes as little as 10 hours before operational deployment. The fuel shortage prevented extended cross-country flights where students could practice navigation techniques under realistic conditions. Consequently, pilots arrived at carrier squadrons unable to reliably navigate to distant targets and returned to their ships. Lieutenant Russell Reiserer from VF-31, aboard USS Cabot, intercepted the second wave's leading elements 60 miles from the task force. His division of Hellcats attacked from upsun, achieving complete tactical surprise against the enemy formation. The Japanese pilots failed to maintain proper lookout doctrine, allowing Americans to approach undetected until opening fire. Within minutes, 5 enemy aircraft spiraled toward the ocean, trailing smoke and flames from catastrophic structural damage. The surviving Japanese aircraft attempted to continue their attack run, but encountered successive Hellcat formations positioned at different altitudes. Each American interception followed similar patterns, diving attacks from superior altitude, followed by zoom climbs back to perch positions. The Hellcats maintained energy advantage throughout engagements, dictating combat terms while denying Japanese pilots opportunities for effective retaliation. This tactical dominance reflected superior aircraft performance, combined with extensive energy management training that maximized the Hellcats' advantages. Japanese pilots trained for close-range maneuvering combat found themselves unable to engage effectively at high speeds, where the Zero became unmanageable. The aircraft's light wing loading and modest power created control forces that stiffened dramatically above 300 miles per hour. At speeds where Hellcats maneuvered comfortably, Zeros required excessive control input and responded sluggishly. The second wave's attack on Task Force 58 achieved minimal results as survivors penetrated the fighter screen in scattered groups. Anti-aircraft fire from screening destroyers and cruisers created dense barrage patterns that further dispersed attacking formations. The few Japanese aircraft reaching the carriers encountered concentrated defensive fire from multiple vessels, firing proximity-fused shells that exploded near targets rather than requiring direct hits. Only one torpedo bomber successfully launched its weapon, which USS Indiana easily evaded through timely maneuvering. The massive battleship simply turned inside the torpedo's turning radius, allowing the weapon to pass harmlessly astern. The failed attack exemplified Japanese aviation's collapse. Despite committing over 100 aircraft, the strike force achieved nothing while losing 2/3 of its strength to American fighters and anti-aircraft fire. Commander McCampbell, leading VF-15's second strike, encountered the third Japanese wave at 1100 hours. His formation of 12 Hellcats engaged over 40 enemy aircraft in a running battle lasting 20 minutes. McCampbell personally destroyed 7 Japanese planes, while his wingman, Lieutenant Roy Rushing, accounted for 4 additional victories. The engagement demonstrated cumulative effects of American training advantages as experienced pilots exploited every enemy mistake. Japanese formations dissolved into individual aircraft maneuvering defensively, abandoning their attack mission to survive overwhelming fighter opposition. Some pilots jettisoned their bombs and torpedoes immediately upon sighting Hellcats, desperate to reduce weight and increase maneuverability. But even unburdened, the Zeros could not escape American fighters that overtook them in level flight, caught them in climbs, and destroyed them in diving attacks they could not follow. If you find this story engaging, please take a moment to subscribe and enable notifications. It helps us continue producing in-depth content like this. Lieutenant Commander Kenji Suzuki observed the third wave's destruction from his damaged Zero struggling back toward the Japanese fleet. His aircraft bore multiple .50 caliber holes through wings and fuselage, with one elevator cable severed and the engine running rough. The severe losses exceeded anything experienced in previous carrier battles, including Midway, where at least some aircraft successfully attacked enemy ships. Today's operations achieved virtually nothing, while losing dozens of aircraft and irreplaceable pilots to enemy fighters. The intelligence failure became apparent as returning pilots reported encountering an entirely new American fighter with unprecedented performance characteristics. Previous intelligence estimates based on captured F6F Wildcats suggested American fighters remained inferior to updated Zero variants in all performance parameters, except diving speed. The Hellcat's ability to outclimb, outturn at high speed, and absorb tremendous damage contradicted every assumption underlying Japanese tactical planning. Aboard Taiho, Admiral Ozawa received fragmentary reports, indicating catastrophic losses among all three attack waves. Surviving pilots described overwhelming fighter opposition, with American aircraft appearing at every altitude and direction. The coordinated defensive system prevented concentration of attacking forces while achieving disproportionate attrition against Japanese formations. Radio intercepts suggested American losses remained minimal despite engaging superior numbers of Japanese aircraft throughout the morning's operations. Air operations officers aboard Japanese carriers tallied mounting casualties as aircraft failed to return from missions. The first wave launched 69 aircraft, but only 27 returned to their carriers, with many bearing significant battle damage. The second wave suffered even worse, with barely 1/3 of 128 aircraft surviving the American fighter gauntlet. These losses represented not just aircraft, but irreplaceable pilots whose training required years of peacetime development. The implications extended beyond immediate tactical defeat to strategic collapse of Japanese naval aviation capability. The returning pilots exhibited signs of severe psychological trauma from their encounter with American fighters. Young aviators who graduated training just weeks earlier described terror and helplessness, facing an enemy that seemed invulnerable to their attacks. Their 7.7mm machine guns appeared completely ineffective, while American 50s tore their aircraft apart with devastating efficiency. The myth of the Zero's invincibility shattered completely as pilots witnessed squadron mates destroyed without opportunity for effective resistance. Veteran pilots like Lieutenant Komatsu struggled to comprehend the reversal of aerial superiority they had enjoyed throughout the war's early years. The tactical methods developed through successful campaigns in China, Southeast Asia, and the Pacific no longer functioned against this new American fighter. Years of combat experience became meaningless when the enemy refused engagement on terms where Japanese pilots excelled. Morale aboard Japanese carriers plummeted as maintenance crews counted empty parking spots where aircraft should have returned. The flight decks, designed to operate 75 aircraft, each now held scattered remnants of once powerful air groups. Mechanics and armourers who prepared aircraft for morning strikes stood idle with no machines to service or weapons to load. The human dimension of defeat became apparent as friends and squadron mates failed to return from what promised to be decisive victory. Admiral Ozawa contemplated implications of continuing operations with drastically reduced air groups. A fourth wave of 82 aircraft prepared for launch, but reconnaissance reports indicated American carriers maintained full combat capability despite 3 mass attacks. The sacrifice of additional pilots and aircraft seemed pointless against an enemy, demonstrating overwhelming tactical and technical superiority. Yet, withdrawal abandoned the Saipan garrison and acknowledged defeat in what Japanese planners considered the decisive battle for Pacific supremacy. The F6F Hellcat's dominance stemmed from comprehensive design advantages addressing every aspect of aerial combat. The Pratt & Whitney R2-800 engine's 2,000 horsepower output provided superior climb rate, acceleration, and high-altitude performance, where thin air reduced the Zero's already marginal power-to-weight ratio. The Hellcat could climb at 3,500 feet per minute compared to the Zero's 2,600 feet per minute, enabling American pilots to maintain energy advantage throughout engagements. This climb rate superiority meant Hellcat pilots could escape unfavorable situations by simply pointing their noses skyward and climbing away from pursuing Zeros. Japanese pilots watched helplessly as American fighters climbed beyond reach, establishing altitude advantage before diving back into combat. The psychological impact of this helplessness compounded tactical disadvantages, creating cascading morale problems that infected entire air groups. The armament disparity proved equally decisive. Each Hellcat's 650 caliber Browning machine guns delivered combined firepower exceeding 100 rounds per second. The ammunition supply of 400 rounds per gun provided 30 seconds of sustained fire, allowing multiple engagement opportunities without ammunition conservation concerns. Japanese pilots reported that even brief bursts from Hellcat guns produced catastrophic damage requiring immediate bailout or resulting in instant death. The Zero's armament combined two 20mm Type 99 cannons with two 7.7mm Type 97 machine guns, presenting theoretical firepower advantages through explosive cannon shells. However, the cannon's low muzzle velocity created significant trajectory drop, requiring different aiming points from machine guns. Limited ammunition of 60 rounds per cannon forced pilots to conserve fire, reducing practical rate during extended engagements. The 7.7mm machine guns lacked stopping power against armored American fighters, while their 700 rounds per gun could not compensate for inadequate penetration capability. American radar technology provided decisive tactical advantages through early warning and fighter direction capabilities. The SK air search radar detected aircraft at 100 miles range, while SM height-finding radar determined altitude within 500 feet accuracy. This information fed into combat information centers, where trained officers plotted all contacts on vertical display boards. Fighter direction officers vectored defending fighters using VHF radio equipment, providing clear communications despite atmospheric interference. The integrated system transformed aerial defense from individual pilot initiative to coordinated tactical operations, maximizing defensive efficiency. Japanese carriers lacked effective radar systems, with most vessels relying on visual observation for air defense coordination. Without height-finding capability or integrated fighter direction, Japanese combat air patrols operated independently using pre-war tactical doctrine. The absence of centralized control prevented efficient fighter allocation against multiple incoming raids while limiting tactical flexibility during engagements. By late 1944, a new Japanese Navy pilot graduated with just 40 hours flying time, while his American opponent had at least 525 hours. American pilots averaged extensive gunnery training, with camera guns recording accuracy during simulated combat. Formation tactics received equal emphasis, with pilots learning energy management, mutual support, and section tactics during advanced training. Operational training units provided realistic combat preparation using experienced instructors rotating from frontline squadrons. Japanese replacement pilots averaged just 100 hours total flight time, with minimal combat training before operational deployment. The fuel shortage forced reliance on ground instruction and limited flying hours in obsolete training aircraft. Most pilots never fired weapons at aerial targets before entering combat, while formation flying emphasized parade ground precision over tactical flexibility. The abbreviated training program eliminated aerobatics, instrument flying, and night operations considered essential in pre-war curriculum. The qualitative difference in pilot capability magnified aircraft performance disparities throughout aerial engagements. The fourth Japanese wave launched despite mounting evidence of catastrophic losses among earlier strikes. Admiral Ozawa committed his remaining 82 aircraft, hoping to achieve some damage against American carriers before withdrawing westward. However, these aircraft encountered even more intense fighter opposition as American carriers recovered, refueled, and relaunched their combat air patrols. The systematic destruction continued with mechanical precision as Hellcats positioned at multiple altitudes engaged each incoming group. By 14:30 hours, American search aircraft located the Japanese fleet 275 miles west-northwest of Task Force 58. Admiral Mitscher launched a maximum effort strike of 216 aircraft, despite extreme range requiring careful fuel management. The American strike included 85 Hellcat fighters, demonstrating offensive capability beyond pure fleet defense roles. While Japanese carriers struggled to maintain minimal defensive patrols with surviving aircraft, American carriers surged, overwhelming offensive power. The role reversal from morning's defensive success to afternoon offensive operations showcased American operational superiority that Japanese forces could not match. The American strike found Japanese carriers virtually defenseless, with only 35 operational fighters remaining from over 400 aircraft available that morning. Hellcat fighters swept aside token opposition while dive bombers and torpedo planes attacked without significant interference. The carrier Hyo sank after multiple torpedo hits, while Zuikaku and Chiyoda suffered severe damage from bomb strikes. Japanese anti-aircraft fire proved ineffective against coordinated attacks pressed home with determination by experienced American pilots. The Battle of the Philippine Sea demonstrated that technological superiority combined with superior training could completely negate enemy tactical doctrine, regardless of determination or experience. Japanese naval aviation built its reputation on superior aircraft and extensively trained pilots, achieving decisive victories throughout 1941 and 1942. The Zero fighter dominated every opponent through exceptional maneuverability and range, while pilots accumulated combat experience across multiple campaigns. The Hellcat's introduction reversed this dynamic completely through purpose-built design specifically countering Japanese advantages. American designers accepted weight penalties for armor and self-sealing tanks, creating an aircraft that survived damage, destroying Zeros instantly. The powerful engine provided performance margins, allowing pilots to dictate engagement terms while avoiding situations where Zeros excelled. The massive firepower of 6 50-caliber guns overwhelmed Japanese aircraft structures designed for minimum weight rather than battle damage resistance. The technological and training advantages demonstrated during the Marianas Turkey Shoot established patterns continuing throughout the Pacific War's remainder. American forces advanced inexorably toward Japan, while Japanese forces attempted increasingly desperate defensive measures without meaningful success. The carrier task forces that seemed vulnerable to Japanese attack in 1941 became unstoppable instruments of American power projection by 1944. Veterans of the Philippine Sea battle remembered the morning of June 19, 1944, as the day American naval aviation achieved unquestioned supremacy over Japanese opponents. Months of preparation, training, and technological development culminated in a few hours of aerial combat that eliminated Japanese carrier aviation's offensive capability. The Hellcat fighter proved itself as the weapon that transformed American carriers from vulnerable targets into dominant instruments of naval power. The pilots who flew these aircraft demonstrated that systematic training could produce competent aviators in quantity, overwhelming elite opponents through numerical and qualitative superiority. The lessons learned from the Marianas Turkey Shoot influenced naval aviation development for decades, as nations recognized the importance of integrating technology, training, and tactical doctrine. Thank you for watching. For more detailed historical breakdowns, check out the other videos on your screen now, and don't forget to subscribe.